It is. Oh.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's live AMA. My name is Maggie. I'm the head of marketing at crypto.com, and I'll be hosting for today's live stream. Joining us today is the Nervos Network. They are one of the proof of work, multi-asset and store value general purpose blockchain, and set to resolve some of the existing limitations that we're facing with the current version of blockchain, such as Bitcoin and Ethereum. So joining us is the co-founder of the Nervos Network, Kevin Wang. Earlier this week, we have collected a lot of questions from the community through our Twitter, and Kevin and his team has selected about 20 or so to address at today's AMA. For the questions that have been selected, that means you will share a pool of $600 worth of their token CKByte, and the prize will be distributed directly to your Crypto.com app account within 2 weeks or so. So without further ado, let's give us a warm welcome to Kevin. Thanks, Kevin, for joining us today.
Hi, Maggie. Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, before we dive in, answering and addressing all of the questions raised by our community, would you like to give us a brief introduction about yourself, your team, and also the Nervos Network?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Kevin and co-founder of Nervos, and so I come from a engineering background. So started my career doing data analytics and data-backed applications, big data, when I was IBM Silicon Valley Lab. And so did that for a few years, then sort of came out and jumped into the startup world, built my own startup after that. And it was an online education startup and company. And then, while building my previous company, this is how I got in touch with, Bitcoin and, the cryptocurrencies in general, and, Ethereum and blockchain tech. And just really fascinating. I think I probably have the similar story with a lot of folks in the audience or general people in the community. So got really interested and started with some of my friends, longtime friends, a new layer 1 project and protocol, and we started in the early of 2018. I think January of 2018. And I think then it's been more than 2 years, so it's really a good experience. In terms of the the team behind the project, so a lot of us, when we started the project, we had been in the crypto community for a long time, and this is definitely not our first blockchain related project. So when the founding team, we had built. We have people that were core developers of Ethereum, and then did a lot of the research and scaling architecture design on Ethereum, and then we built one of the leading crypto exchanges. It's no longer, very prominent right now. This was like before Binance was the sort of the new generation sort of crypto to crypto exchange. So back then, our people in our founding team built wallets, and then it's still one of the largest. I think it is still the largest Ethereum wallet currently in the world. Token. And then we built the sort of the largest mining pool, Spark pool on Ethereum today. And then we also built, one of the most prominent Ethereum community in China. So really, if you look at the founding team, so most of us are engineering background, and then we're kind of like the OG of the Ethereum community in China. So we started in 2018, started Nervos Network, and then the sort of the beginning was really just to have seen some of the challenges that Ethereum were facing at the time, and a lot of the more architectural sort of fundamental issues. And then, we wanted to do also a general sort of smart contract platform like Ethereum, but we realize, either scalability or virtual machine limitations. You really have to sort of think from the scratch.
Mhm.
So we, if you think about, Bitcoin as sort of inspiration of all the blockchain, and then Ethereum, takes a direction where introduce the account model, and then the sort of adding a virtual machine to the execution. So we kind of also want to achieve the same goal, but then we take sort of, if Ethereum turns right, we turn left, right? So we take a different direction, but try to achieve the same goal, which is based on Bitcoin's UTXO model, which is really good in terms of parallel computation, because with Ethereum you can only do like one transaction at a time for all the nodes, and then whenever you have a UTXO model with clear dependency in declarations, and you can do like a parallel computation. So we started from that, and then we pick a consensus algorithm that's more close to Bitcoin, Nakamoto consensus, and then with POW framework, and then instead of trying to just scale the system, right, within layer one from the very get-go, we wanted to embrace layer two, right? So this is also a pretty big differentiation, in that we believe that just like an internet stack, it's difficult to squeeze all the concerns within one layer. But you wanted to have a layered approach where every layer would have their clear segregation of the constraints they address. So layer one, in Nervos Network, is for security, and then for decentralization. Again, we want to make the cost of running nodes really low, for example, and then we want to make the economic model sustainable. So sustainability is also one of the goals for layer one, but not so much scalability, right? So we wanted to build both the economic model and the consensus model, and then the proof of work instead of proof of stake. And then we want to move the scalability issues to layer two, right?
Mhm.
So that's our sort of whole vision uh, of the Nervos Network. And then we want it to be, when you introduce all these um, design factors, then we want the layer one really to be, it will become more of a store of value layer, because we want the most important assets to be stored on layer one, and then we want to make sure that the economic model supports the sort of value accrual and value proposition preservation of assets on layer one. And then layer two is where all these transactions happens. You can essentially have a limited scalability.
Mhm. I recently we have talked to quite a number of projects, and all under quite a consistent theme, which is to resolve the problem of scalability
Hmm.
that we're
Yeah.
witnessing. And I would say like close to 80% of the projects we talk to, they take the proof of stake approach, um, and very distinctly different from what you guys are doing. And
Hmm.
that also leads to the very first question from the community, that with your design of keeping layer one to mainly store value, and then layer two for really driving scalability,
Hmm.
why should developers choose to build on Nervos Network but not the other alternatives? We're not talking about just Ethereum. There's like quite a number of other alternatives out there right now. And what are the key features that they can get out of quite a different design that you were just introducing us about?
Yeah, I think it allows, it really allows developers to sort of tailor the architecture to their own needs, right? For example, if they want more composability with other applications, like most DeFi applications are, then they can build on layer one directly, and then sort of take advantage of the unified piece of state. And then that will be difficult for when you have to do it on a sharded blockchain, because not all the states are concentrated in one piece. Um, and then if the application itself is values more finality, and then cheaper cost, and then throughput, like what a decentralized exchange would do, then naturally they can build have a hybrid layer one layer two approach, and then um, uh, take advantage of having sort of a dedicated mempool, and then have predictable sort of demand on the layer two block, and then just being a way more scalable than any pure layer one approach can offer. So they can do that, right? So what's unique about Nervos, this overall sort of architecture, is we're building this layer one, layer two as an integrated approach. So which means when you launch application on layer one or layer two, the programming model will be similar, will be the same, right? When you run your applications on layer one or layer two or hybrid of layer one and layer two. And that will be a differentiator from having to for example build layer two on Ethereum or other blockchains, where you almost have to write custom code and then get into specifically design the circuits of zero knowledge proofs, and then that sort of thing. So for Nervos, when you write an application, the goal that we want to have is whether it's going to be strictly layer one, or you want to run on layer one and then plus a sidechain, or layer one and then layer two, like a roll-up layer two, or some sort of state channels. We want to make sure that the code that you write, right, can be executed in sort of all of these infrastructure, and then you can focus on your logic, application logic.
Again, what you just described is quite different from quite a number of projects that we talked to. The next question is not really how I would see our crypto space, which is about competitions and competitors. But let's raise it and see what you think about that. So among all of the other blockchain projects trying to solve scalability issue, but taking a different approach, which one do you see as the biggest competitors right now? And how would you compare Nervos Network with them or against them, in your opinion?
Yeah, so in a way, I mean, the way that people try, the layer one protocols try to solve the scalability issues, I think there's a lot of overlap between all these solutions, right? And everybody sort of have their own unique approach, right? So they're basically, the way I look at it, there are basically two camps, right? One camp is called one camp is called everything on layer one approach, which is purely optimized for TPS. And then you see blockchain say here you can have 5,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 TPS, and then therefore you can do everything here, right? So that's one approach. And the other one is essentially multi-chain approach, right? So whether it's sharding, it's layer two, it's side chains, sister chains, if all that's different is how do you design this? How do you sort of anchor your security model in between these multiple chains? And then what trade-offs you're making, right? So the first sort of camp where sort of everything on layer one has this natural limitation, because you're essentially, I mean, if you're really optimizing for computation cost and then transaction throughput, you're essentially competing. So one, you're competing for centralized system, right? You're competing against centralized system. And then two is that, it's very difficult to, I mean, in my opinion at least, right, to retain value, so the crypto economics value of native tokens, because we have seen Bitcoin has forked many times, and then in the past, and then there are many Bitcoin-like but cheaper sort of blockchains in the past, right? And say, hey, we're 1,000th cost if you were to transact here than if you're transacting Bitcoin. But in the end, you see, precisely because it's so easy to do, because anybody can spin up a chain, and they say, look, this is a new chain that can do the same thing as a Bitcoin, but then transact, um, with the thousands of the cost. And then anybody can do it. So you almost have a limited supply of transaction throughputs by cloning or by I mean, sidechain actually does the same. Sidechain and layer 2 does the same. So you're competing with all of that, which is it's very difficult to accrue value. And then
Yeah.
for the multi-chain side, whether it's sharding or it's layer 2, it really comes down to topology, right? So how do you connect this multiple chains together? And then whether you're looking at ETH 2.0 or Polkadot or Cosmos, essentially there's always going to be this center chain or this sort of the hub chain where they coordinate all these blockchains. But in all of them, other than Nervos Network, the hub chain's goal is more to pass around messages in between these different spokes, right? In different shards or different parachains. That's what Polkadot says. But for us, we want to make sure, because the hop chain is the sort of the centerpiece of the entire topology. So you want to make sure the hop chain is going to be the most secure and then the most has the highest security of all of them. Because if you can attack the hop chain, then everything else is moot. So so the hop chain in Nervos Network ecosystem is we want to concentrate all the value to the hub chain, right? This is where the store value comes in. So it's not just a sort of a hub where you can direct traffic, right? You can pass all the traffic around it, but this is also where the most valuable assets are stored at the most highest security, and then the most assets are stored there. And then we have a crypto economic design that will make sure that the value accrual will happen to the hub chain, so it will be more sustainable, and then it can then support these layer 2 chains or these side chains or these different shards, less valuable shards. So that's the core difference that I see, right? So it's just what do you designate as that's the hub in this multi-chain topology architecture?
So then you just briefly touched upon the economic design to encourage the store of value on the hub chain on the layer 1. So I guess that is how you design the role and the utility of your native token CKByte.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is an interesting analogy that has been quoted by this community member,
Yeah.
claiming that owning CKByte is equivalent to owning land.
Yeah.
Can you explain it to us a little bit more how it works and how value is accrued to the token through the ownership to actually other tokens?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, right, so the native token, I mean, blockchain, the reason blockchain can be decentralized is because there's crypto economics behind it, right? And then the sustainability of the crypto economics I think is uttermost important. And so so the reason Bitcoin can be a store of value is because Bitcoin has only one asset, which is BTC, right? The blockchain secured only one asset. And then the reason it can be secure is precisely because the miners are paid with BTC. The miners are not paid by US dollars, right? They're paid by the native asset, BTC. So that if BTC becomes more valuable, then also miners income increases proportionally to how much BTC appreciates, so that you can always make sure that it's secure. Just like when you have a city, right? If the wealth of city increases, it automatically provision defense budget to recruit the military, so that you can make sure it automatically will just become more safe. Otherwise, it will just be looted sooner or later, right? But the same mechanism, you can't find that on like general smart contract platforms, because there's a decoupling of what's being preserved or being saved on the blockchain themselves, and then the blockchain's own safety, right? by the same sort of analogy, on Ethereum, you would imagine the miners should be paid not with Ether, fixed amount of Ether, but should really be sort of a basket of ERC20 tokens, right? And maybe Ether itself with one of them, and maybe even value weighted, and that's you can get the same effect of what we're talking about Bitcoin, sort of to defend against attacks. But it's not, right. It's by Ether, and then the Ether's price does not always sort of corresponding to how much security you need to provision to defend the network. So what we're trying to do is we try to come up with a cryptocurrency native token that will have that effect, right? Essentially, the demand of the native token should translate automatically to the demand of the demand for the assets on the blockchain should automatically translate to the demand for the native token, and then because the miners are paid with the native token, that sort of the defense budget or the security budget can then be provisioned up and down automatically, right? And then what we come up with is essentially the cost. You can say state rent, right? The cost to occupy the global storage or global state, and this also has to be paid more um, uh, ongoingly instead of just one time. So state rent, it's almost perfect for the purposes. The more demand there is for specific assets, then the more state occupation that it will occupy, and then the longer you try to occupy the global state, then the more sort of state rent then they have to pay, and then to contribute to the security of the ecosystem. So in a way, it's like a commons problem, right? So how do you coordinate automatically of the community members, right? In this case, holders of different assets of the overall ecosystem to contribute to the sustainability of the security of the network. And
But then
um,
if I just heard what you're saying, it sounds more like renting the land instead of owning the land, because as long as you're still using the land, you still need to pay rent, right? Where like right now on Ethereum, you just pay one off and then you can use it. And that sounds to me more like land ownership. So I guess that leads to the next question, which is like how this cost structure or crypto economic structure is actually more sustainable in long term. If you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
yeah, so first to your question, right? It's you don't have to necessarily like click a button and then pay for the rent. So when we talk about state rent, this is the difference between this is the reason why on Ethereum, state rent is still not implemented, because if you were to think along line of Ethereum state rent, you have to click buttons, right? And then it's really difficult to coordinate that against, like ERC20 contract will have tens of thousands of owners. How do you make sure everybody pays their share? It's very difficult. So the way we do it is you basically pay that with opportunity cost, right? Um, so there is something called secondary inflation, right? Secondary issuance on the Nervos network, which is every token holder will proportionally get their percentage of this new issuance, unless you use your token to store stuff, right? You use the land to build a shop, right? If you use it, then you don't get your share of this issuance, this special issuance, and then your share of special issuance go to the miners.
Yeah.
So you see, if I just hold the token, I don't do anything, then everybody just you can think about like get a airdrop, or every block everybody like a tiny bit of airdrop, right? Because everybody gets it, so it's fair. It's it is not diluting anyone. But for the people that actually use their land, they don't get this tiny airdrop, so to speak. Um, then their share go to the miners, go to the security providers. So that's how. So you miss out certain, sort of, we call this inflation shelter. You can't, if you don't use it, you can get sheltered from inflation. But if you do use it, then you miss it. That you portion goes to security providers. So yeah, so you own it. You don't have to keep paying it, but you just use opportunity cost to pay rent, so to speak.
Okay. Okay. I like the analogy. Thanks for that. So
Yeah.
let's move on to talk a little bit more about the overall ecosystem.
Yeah.
Um, as we briefly touched on that earlier, it seems like proof of stake is a much more popular approach lately, at least in 2020.
Yeah.
What is the reason behind the proof of work consensus method that you guys
Mhm.
have decided to adopt?
Yeah. So again, proof of stake research in general started, with Ethereum, and then if you look at most projects started in 2017, 2018, they tend to use proof of stake. But and the reason behind the proof of stake is with proof of stake you typically can have higher throughputs, right? And a lot of the proof of stake even I mean, in my opinion, most proof of stake will eventually get into delegated proof of stake, whether it's by design in the protocol or by sort of staking pool, right? Staking as a service. Sort of you delegating your token so that they can produce block for you. um, but the issue of proof of stake is uh, it's very difficult for it's very easy for it's very easy to get this rich gets richer issue, right? So the early participants in the system, as long as they don't sell their tokens, they can there's no way that you can force them to give up sort of the block producing capabilities, right? And we can already see this in blockchains like EOS. And then once the power is concentrated, it's almost impossible to break it. And because all they have to do is just hold on their tokens, and their alliance and friends can just monopolize the. It's not just the token issuance so that they get richer, but also they can exclude anybody else from participating. It's easy for them to exclude new players into this block producing privilege in a way. So it's questionable whether it's truly open. Give you the example. The reason is because they can produce blocks, then they can censor transactions, and then so any sort of new block producer, participating in the consensus algorithm has to be a transaction in the first place, right? So if they want, they can prevent new participants in the consensus algorithm, therefore just solidify their power. But with the proof of work, this is impossible because again, it's way more open, and anybody can get their hands on a piece of hardware, and then anybody can have a cheap electricity and cheap electricity cost, and then they can be a block producer, right? So and also with sort of technology changes over time, you can't, for proof of work, for example, it's mostly the electricity cost and hardware manufacturing capabilities, and that always shifts with paradigm change of technology. Whereas proof of stake, all you need to do is just hold on your tokens. So I would argue proof of work is more open.
Mhm.
It's more suited to be sort of the global, as a position for a layer one protocol, as truly a global open participation, decentralized infrastructure than proof of stake.
Okay, very, very good answer. Love that. So since the token CKByte is on the proof of work network, does that mean that your token is mineable like Bitcoin as well?
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely mining, and then there are already multiple ASIC machines on the market
Mhm.
that yeah, people can mine.
So the trying to understand the terminologies, I was trying to get myself familiarized yesterday. So the
Yeah,
Nervos CKB is the layer one blockchain protocol that you have launched
yeah,
with the mainnet.
yeah.
And
Correct.
then on layer two, have you guys got on any core development? The next question is asking about a sidechain project that you build on layer two called
Mhm.
Muta.
Yeah.
I try to find a little bit more information on that, but maybe I'll leave it for you to explain a little bit more.
Yeah. So on layer two, we really like we're very active in building the infrastructure layer two ourselves as well, so that we can have that unified experience. And then Muta is one part of it. So if you look at layer 2, there are several paths that people will reach for layer 2, right? So one is that you would build a layer 1 protocol, you build a layer 1 application, but then you need more scalability, or you have specific finality requirements that you prefer a layer 2. So in those cases, you could start with a layer 1 protocol and then sort of scale into layer 2. Sort of in this direction, typically the most leading candidate today in the industry is some sort of roll-up approach. And then and this is something where our community will see by the end of the year. We'll have the first version of roll-up coming up, and then so developers can build applications on layer 1 and then scale to layer 2. You also have these use cases where you want to have this application specific blockchains and or side chains, where the vision is that for developers you can start with somewhat centralized approach, which is, by the way, very typical in Ethereum, right? So if you look at all the DeFi projects, people have an admin key, and they're typically owned by one person, and then they're dedicated to multi-sig, and then then some sort of governance mechanism to control it. So you can do the same thing with a layer 2 approach, a sidechain. If really just one person controlling the admin key can do anything they want, you might as well have a more centralized layer 2 as well. Just have the same person that control the admin key control the layer 2 sort of consensus algorithm as well. And then gradually you can shift to more of a sort of multi-sig approach, and then sort of to community consensus. So we're building a sidechain framework in that direction as well. I think the first version is going to be coming out next month in October, being a more like centralized, but with all the interchain communications built in. And then you have something, more similar to use cases you see in the Cosmos or substrate community, where people start with an independent blockchain first, right? So in terms of Polkadot, you start with a substrate build blockchain, built with a substrate framework. And then maybe, that's enough for you for some time. And later on, you can sort of reattach that to, in Polkadot sense, the parachain, the relay chain, become a parachain. Obviously, you're going to pay some cost for that, but then you get a privilege of shared community. So that, for us, that's basically the Muta framework, the way we see how Muta will go. So you can use Muta to build an independent blockchain and then operate it for some time. And then, once this really is taking off, and then you need to delegate that security, it's growing, and then the assets growing, and then it's no longer, you don't want to take the burden of, having to secure everything. You can just attach that back to layer 1. And become a layer 2 blockchain framework itself. So that's more like a chain first approach. So that's what this person talked about Muta framework. It's more to target that scenario. And then we, the Muta framework it's pretty complete right now. And then we actually built the Huobi chain with Huobi Group, one of the other crypto exchanges. And that should be launched by the end of this year, and obviously they control the timeline. But that's once it's launched, it's going to be sort of the running example of the Muta framework, and then and then we'll that will be a way for adoption for us as well.
Well, looking forward to see what sort of traction that you guys can generate by then. I think like proven use cases is always useful to help build to the next milestone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The next question is related to Nervos' vision to limit the global state of the protocol. As the global state is maintained by full nodes, have you ever thought of a mechanism to reward full nodes?
To rework full nodes? Oh, reward full nodes.
Reward.
Yeah. So obviously full nodes get mate, you mean full nodes that don't produce blocks, right?
Yes.
Okay. So currently, again, this is a dilemma, because if they don't produce blocks, it can be, if you want to have some in protocol compensation for full nodes, it's very easy to be sybiled. to be Sybil attacked. So currently our approach is similar to what Bitcoin's approach is to be able to keep, so two approaches, right? One is to keep, by demanding that people have to hold tokens, so to reduce the sort of state waste as much as possible, because that's going to be, once you occupy a piece of state, then everybody has to keep forever, and that's going to be a one major sort of cost basis, because it's ongoing, not just certain point in time. So encourage people to use the state more efficiently by tying sort of the economics model to it, right? That's one. And the second one is that to make full nodes as affordable as possible, right? As cheap as possible. And part of it is to sort of to target a specific, because when you think about running full nodes, state storage is one, and there's also the bandwidth requirements. Whether you're able to catch up with the network, sort of block producing, let's say with a cheap computer at home, or with a cheap cloud based node, right? So we want to calibrate on the bandwidth, and not to make it so that block producing to be so fast and so extreme, so that the cost of running full nodes is very high. And then this goes back to our consensus model, where we have a variable sort of block producing rate, block time, and it essentially targets the block propagation efficiency, right? So if, like in Bitcoin, a block is produced every 10 minutes, but that's probably wasteful, because there's way more time than needed for the block to be fully propagated through the network, right? And then for Ethereum, for example, a block to prove every 6-7 seconds, but there's no sort of feedback mechanism to control how often the block should be produced. So with Nervos, what we do is we look at the uncle rate, right? So we look at for one block, for the next block, whether there's a fork, how many uncles, right, there is, and then that it's an indicator of how well propagated the network is, the P2P network is, how efficient the P2P network is, and then we target a specific uncle rate. So if it becomes wasteful, then we'll reduce the difficulty so that more blocks will be produced, and then the network utilization will be higher, right? So if it is lower, if there's too many uncle produced, there's so many forks, right, as part of the consensus process, then we will make the block time longer so that it will reduce these forks. So that's the idea. So in a way, we want to make, so going back to your question, we want to make the block time that's reasonable, so that even sort of family or regular internet hardware situations can still run full nodes, right? You'd be able to catch up, and then it doesn't require exorbitant, bandwidth that you can only run these very expensive, specialized hardware, and deploy to core infrastructure of the internet, so that you can get that throughput. And this is, again, if you look at just about all other high throughput blockchains and pure layer one protocol, this is the shortcuts that everybody takes for high throughput layer one blockchains. Because at the end of the day, it's, as a decentralized protocol, you have to propagate your data through all your nodes, right? And then it's the P2P network efficiency that will determine whether you take shortcuts there or not. That will determine your block the level of decentralization of the consensus algorithm.
Okay. Mindful of time, so I think we have to touch on what everyone has been talking about lately, which is DeFi, right?
Yeah.
What Nervos plan, in particular, for maybe in the remaining of 2020, for the DeFi space?
Yeah. So we are, we're laying the ground for several critical infrastructure for DeFi. So if you look at what's the most important or the most widely used sort of building blocks for DeFi, those are stable coins, oracles, and decentralized exchanges, and then we're also you know um, we're pushing on all of them. We're building some of the decentralized exchanges ourselves, and then obviously we hope to give it to the community to operate. But and we are stable coins are coming along pretty well, and the community should see some announcements pretty soon. And uh, we are integrated with 3 oracles today, and then we're also pushing the documentation for oracle integration for Nervos. And but beyond, on top of all that, we are also building a cross-chain bridge to Bitcoin and Ethereum, so that assets can flow to Nervos as well. So I think those, if you put them together, is I think it will be you can say like the minimum playground for DeFi. That's the foundation for DeFi, right? And then beyond that, we do have community team that are building various sort of DeFi protocols on top of Nervos to take advantage of the infrastructure of the above. Yeah. So I think the rest of this year will be like a building up of these infrastructure, and then we definitely expect a more robust DeFi ecosystem on Nervos next year.
So the 3 Oracle projects that you have partnered with, they are Chainlink and Band Protocol. And what's the third?
The third is not announced yet, so we're waiting for the
Okay.
third.
So
Sorry, I'm a
we
little bit ahead
wait
of
for it
myself.
later.
Yeah. So
I
there's
guess
another one.
the next question is how these partnerships help Nervos system, or maybe the Oracle system on the partner side,
Mhm.
to scale, and what exactly Nervos is providing to these partnerships.
Yeah, so I think just like any early platforms, right? The most that we can provide is sort of sweat equity, right? So we built the platform, and then we're the people that are most familiar with it. So we're putting a lot of time helping them to integrate the solutions onto Nervos, and sort of doing the sort of development work, and to help them to put the solution together. And what they get, I think, is again is to be early in the ecosystem. Obviously, in our mind, has a lot of growth potential into the future. Sort of being the early player in here, you have more mind share, and then have more first mover advantage, and then you'll be integrated with the more applications later built on Nervos. So yeah, so that's the partnerships.
So look at like the names you mentioned briefly. I would say let's take Cosmo as an example.
Yeah.
They got like partnership after partnership that they have announced, and they made really good traction this year. And
Yeah.
I would say they're sort of like peaking to the prime time on adoption, right? Looking at Nervos network and ecosystem, uh, let's speculate a little bit. When do you think you get to that point?
I think we're probably sooner than most people realize. Again, it's because even for Cosmos, I mean, we're close to a lot of the folks with literally in Cosmos. That obviously they started much earlier than us. But even with Cosmos, they went through this prolonged period of infrastructure build up,
Yeah.
and then it's really a lot of R&D that put into what enables what they have today. And obviously there's they were able to get developer to build on them as well. So I think we also spend a lot of efforts this year on infrastructure build up, and then those are going to be absolutely critical for the adoption of the framework. But either looking from developer tools, sort of ecosystem, supports, and then key pieces of infrastructure, as well as layer 1, layer 2 interoperability, and then or crossing bridges. I think all of these are pretty much built in parallel today. And then I think by the end of the year, like I said, I think we'll be able to go pretty far in terms of having a lot of them in production. And and really after that is going to be sort of the more community-led phase of projects emerging, and then gaining traction. So yeah, so that's I'm definitely I'm definitely optimistic.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
And we got 3 months left, 3.5 months left this
Hmm.
year. It's very
Yeah.
interesting, awkward year.
Special year.
Let's name one like most important milestone that you're looking to achieve before the end of the year. What would that be?
Yeah, I think. Uh, yeah, I think I've been mentioning this a couple of times, right? So having this ecosystem where the most fundamental building pieces are ready. So I think it will be by the end of this year, and then we'll probably have something like more demo or release to show the capabilities then. But it's really, the core pieces of, you can say, DeFi or blockchain applications will be ready. And then we also want to give a unified experience, right? So coming from the wallet, and then be able to interop with different protocols, and then even be able to interop with different sort of applications built on different blockchains through the cross-chain bridge, and then how these things will seamlessly work together. And then so that will be a really important milestone for us.
I also hope that that is the sort of the theme for next year, right? Like for all these different projects and applications to be able to, cross function among each other, to get the DeFi space in a more mature state. So fingers crossed
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
we have already just walked through all 20 questions. So thanks so much, Kevin, for your insights and your time today. Also, a really big thanks to our community for your participation in the event, and also all these great questions you have raised for Kevin to address today. Um, Again, like for the questions that Kevin's team has selected earlier, that means you have won a share of $600 worth of CKByte prize pool, and the prize will be distributed directly to your Crypto.com app account within the next 2 weeks or so. But before closing, Kevin, is there any final words that you would like to share with the Crypto.com community here today?
Yeah, so we're open community, and then we're open protocol. Just I think layer one in particular needs to be very open. So I would invite everybody to come hang out with us. So you can find us on Telegram. We can find out Discord, Twitter, just the usual. I mean, if you just Google around, you can pretty easily find our communication channels, and just come in and hang out, ask questions. I hang out in those channels quite a bit too, so I'm happy to meet everybody there as well.
So don't forget to follow them on the Twitter, which the official handle is Nervos Network, and also follow us, Crypto.com, to stay informed about all of the upcoming developments, upcoming events, and maybe more AMAs to come in the future. So once again, thanks, Kevin, for your great insights today, and until next time.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm just getting my Crypto.com credit card, so it's really cool. I like your products.
Awesome. Can I ask which year that you have applied for, if you don't mind me getting a little bit personal? What color is that?
I just got it. I mean, it's actually on the way. I haven't got it yet. I think, is it a black one?
You think it's the black one? That's funny. You're making a lot of our community members really jealous right now.
Oh, okay. Maybe I shouldn't say more than that.
Anyway,
Anyway,
maybe at one point we'll follow up with like a product review and see what you think about our Visa card.
yeah, again, I like your products.
Thanks so much for your support.
Yeah, absolutely. All
All
right,
right.
thanks, Maggie.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Talk to you.